Sith Troopers? What? Sith Troopers? Imperial First Order Sith Troopers? What? Welcome to my nerd world. I am your host, Jon Justice, and ever since the Star Wars show on Wednesday dropped the images that we had seen before, we'll get into it, but the information on the new Rise of Skywalker Sith Troopers, I have been so looking forward to sitting down and doing the show this week. So much so that I actually spent a lot of time doing some research and compiling information about what we know, things that can hopefully lend some potential clarity, but really it's going to be a lot of speculation on the show this week about what these Sith Troopers could possibly mean for the Rise of Skywalker. So I don't want to waste any more time. Thank you so much for checking the show out this week, and let's go ahead and get right to it.
We've passed on all we know. 1,000 generations live in you now. But this is your fight. We'll always be with you. No one's ever really gone.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you?
I'm no one. There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My nerd world.
Just let it in.
When new Star Wars information invites new viewings or renewed viewings of past films, that's like the best to me. I love that. I love when I get so excited about getting brand new Star Wars information, and then I immediately just want to go and watch Star Wars. And that's what I've been doing since Wednesday. I've kind of been picking and choosing what I want to watch. I watched the last half of Revenge of the Sith, and then I watched the first half last night of The Last Jedi. Only didn't finish it because I was tired and I needed to get some sleep because it had been a long work day. I'm going to watch the rest of it later on today. But this reveal of this Sith Trooper that the Star Wars show did on Wednesday, along with these images, and the San Diego Comic-Con exclusives, and the details surrounding it, has got my head spinning. I am so excited over this information. Confirmation of that leaked poster that we saw several months back where there was a bunch of these Sith Troopers on the cover. Confirmation that they're called Sith Troopers. And what does this mean? Why are we talking about Sith all of a sudden when it comes to the Rise of Skywalker? Look, there's a level of skepticism within and cynicism within the Star Wars fandom that I just do not understand right now. I was actively seeking out people's thoughts about this announcement of this Sith Trooper, and was really surprised that the majority of the content creators that I found that had put out information on this were really skeptical about this, and I just don't get that. And again, I don't think that represents the majority of fandom that is paying attention to this stuff. I think it just represents those individuals that are the content creators, and maybe there is a little bit of that Last Jedi frustration coupled with it. I don't know, but for me, for this fan, I was through the roof over this, and my mind just went to all kinds of different places with what this could mean for the Rise of Skywalker. And because of that, I decided that I was going to go ahead and do a bit more research than I normally do for the show, and I went and did some digging back into the news archives, going back to The Force Awakens to try to find some quotes from J.J. Abrams about a couple of different items that I think might relate to what's happening here with this Sith Trooper. let me get this out of the way first. And then I'm going to kind of lay out the way that the show's going to go this week and ask for your help leading into next week. But first off, let me say this up front, because I want to clear the air over what I believe is a misconception that people have with the mention of the Sith in The Last Jedi specifically, okay? I do agree with individuals when they question why are we bringing Sith into The Rise of Skywalker. Again, we don't have the context yet, but I get why people are saying I don't get this. J.J. Abrams specifically said that Snoke and Kylo Ren were not Sith. That is true. Then everybody seems to be gravitating towards the Kylo Ren line to Rey. And actually, you know what? I might even have the piece of audio. I don't think it's very good. No, it's not. But here, I do have the piece of audio so I'll go ahead and play this for you right now.
Pen?
Oh, it actually is good.
It's time to let old things die. Snoke, Skywalker, the Sith, the Jedi, the Rebels, let it all die. Rey, I want you to join me.
Okay, I want to stop right there, because this is where everybody seems to be landing when it comes to the Sith Trooper and what they're confused about. And they're criticizing this move without even knowing the context of what's going on, saying that line right there doesn't make any sense. In my opinion, it absolutely makes sense. That was Kylo Ren / Ben Solo in a one-on-one conversation with Rey in that moment, trying to have his dark side and the girl that he's got this unbelievable connection to at the same time. That's not necessarily an overarching opinion of the character. That's a character who in the moment saw an opportunity and went for it. And immediately after he gets rejected by Rey, and the legacy lightsaber is broken and he's knocked out, what happens as soon as Kylo Ren wakes up? Hux is standing over him, and he immediately goes and lies to Hux. The girl killed Snoke. Okay? That was an opportunity that Kylo Ren took. And to me, is not necessarily representative of his feelings of actually having the Sith die. I think in the moment, he saw his chance to get everything that he wanted and have Rey be the one to rule the galaxy with him. It was a nice little callback, echo, like poetry, right? It rhymes. Everybody grabs onto that quote from Lucas, but it works. When you go back to Revenge of the Sith, you and I can rule the galaxy, make it how we want it to be. I'm getting the lines wrong, but you know the moment that I'm talking about between Anakin and Padme. That was just one of those. It was another one of those moments. We've seen it time and time again throughout these films. And in that moment, yeah, he was like, yeah, let's let it all die. Let's let the Resistance, let's let Sith, Jedi, Snoke, all of it, you and me, we can rule this, neighborhood on our own. Power couple. And she's like, no, man, I ain't having it. Because what happens at the end of The Last Jedi? He's through the roof angry. In that moment with General Hux, he declares himself Supreme Leader. And then at the end, in his face-off against Luke, he's saying, I'll kill the girl and you, and I will have killed the last Jedi. He's going full in on the dark side. So there is something to be said, and I'm going to lay out again how we're going to play this out through the show this week. There is something to be said that perhaps in the absence with Snoke being out of the picture, with Rey rejecting him, in the time between The Last Jedi and when we get to The Rise of Skywalker, he has decided to embrace full dark side. And much like he was a fanboy of Vader in the original film, he was mimicking Vader in the original film. He's talking to the helmet. I'm going to finish what you started. If he decides to continue to go down that path and go all in for a portion of The Rise of Skywalker, then it makes all the sense in the world that he's going to go ahead and embrace this Sith moniker going so far as to create this army of Sith Troopers, which I do believe are clones, by the way, and we'll get to more of that coming up. And there is I think a lot of the speculation is really going to depend on how much time has actually gone by. I was under the impression that there was a firm confirmation and only a year had gone by. But based off of what I'm hearing in the wake of this reveal of the Sith Trooper and commentary surrounding that, it seems to be that's still up in the air. So there may have been much more time that's gone by between these two films than we have been assuming have gone by. Because when you go back and you look at the films, there really is no set standard. Between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, we had 10 years. Okay, between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, we had 3 years. Between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, you had 3 years. Between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, you had 1 year. Okay? And then when you get down to, TFA, you're just talking about minutes. So JJ can definitely, definitely has the ability to mess with the timeline and have way more time that's gone by between these films than that 1 year, which really makes this possibility of having this new Sith Trooper army, giving Kylo Ren and the First Order enough time to develop this Sith Trooper army. Okay, so here's what I got. I've got a bit of instinctive reaction when this news first dropped. And I'm going to run through the list of things that kind of immediately jumped out to me of questions and a little bit of commentary surrounding it. Okay. I do want to get into, before that, some quotes that I actually found that I hadn't seen before from Rian Johnson talking about the Last Jedi. I'm going to share that with you as well. Also, the little nugget out of the crawl from The Last Jedi that I think helps a bit when we're talking about a couple of these items. Some individuals have been quick to point out, and rightfully so, going to the non-canon book of the Sith. There's a book that's all about the Sith. And there's an interesting quote from the book that could lend some details as to how Palpatine may return, which really plays directly into the rumors that we're hearing about Palpatine's return. Also, this new Sith emblem that is showing up on the packaging for the Sith Trooper was directly taken from that Sith book. There's actually is a portion in that Sith book that talks about Darth Vader, and it has that Sith symbol there. Then we're going to go through, again, sort of a list of items and questions and commentary around what this could mean for the film, do a lot of speculation, pull some quotes from the recent Vanity Fair articles that I think also give a bit of background. And then we'll dive into the MakingStarWars.net story of what they have said these Sith Troopers are about, at least what Jason Ward and those over at MakingStarWars.net know about these troopers. So I'm going to sort of appeal to you in the middle of doing this. While you're listening to the show, drop me a comment, because I don't have a real clear picture of where all this is going yet. I just have a lot of pieces. And I'd be really curious to get your thoughts on not just my commentary, but the information and details that I'm going to lay out in the show this week that may provide a bit of a roadmap to what's going to happen in Revenge of the Sith. All of this has me really, really, really excited, though. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's just go ahead and dive right into it.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
I found a really interesting quote from Cinema Blend. And the quote was from Rian Johnson sharing what he was told from J.J. Abrams about what he had done with The Last Jedi. And I believe I've heard these quotes before, but it's been a long time, and I figured it was a good opportunity to go ahead and share them here in the context of talking about this new information for The Rise of Skywalker. So Rian Johnson was asked during this interview what J.J. Abrams thought of The Last Jedi. And this is the quote from Rian Johnson doing that thing with my fingers. He was into it. And I remember that I pitched him the story at the very beginning, and he had notes. But he wasn't like, oh my God, what the hell are you doing? And then they laughed. He's like, no, he was into it. Because I think he's into the storytelling. He's a great storyteller himself. And he saw the potential of each one of these beats. I think he saw it for what we were going for, which is not, we weren't going for, let's subvert a Star Wars movie. We were going for, let's make a great Star Wars movie that has things in it that will push the limits of what we can do. He was really gracious in stepping back and giving us a blank slate to work with. The starting point was the Force Awakens script, which is quite a big and expansive, wonderful starting point. In that way, we are drawing directly from his work, but from that point forward, it was a blank canvas. And I still firmly believe that thought of this blank canvas really does also entail knowing what the overall arc is going to be. And I do think that there's a big potential here that they are telling the truth, that Palpatine was a part of this all along, and I'm going to give you some of the clues that I have that lend itself to that. I think that Rian Johnson may have made some changes that J.J. Abrams wouldn't have done, especially when it comes to Snoke, but the fact that he ended up killing Snoke in The Last Jedi still worked for the overall story, and especially when bringing Palpatine back. And I'll throw this little nugget in here, and I'm going to be doing this throughout the show this week, but Jason Ward over at MakingStarWars.net, and I remember these reports last year, or actually a couple years ago, this was before the release of The Last Jedi, that there was supposed to be this other threat in The Last Jedi. And there's an interesting little correlation here with something that J.J. Abrams said that we'll get into that never ended up coming to fruition. But there was this rumor going around that actually there was also some tie-in to the Star Wars app and how you were supposed to be able to find these clues and then reveal this new villain that never came to light. So the speculation is that perhaps Palpatine was going to be introduced in The Last Jedi and they pulled the plug on that and decided not to move forward with it. There's a very interesting in close relation thing that happened with The Force Awakens too that might also play into this. But all of this lends a bit of credibility to the idea that Palpatine was a part of this all along. And so to that, let me go through my first instinctive reaction as we begin to fully get into this. First off, with the Sith Trooper, what does this mean, and what were some of the first thoughts that I had when this came up? Well, I first started thinking about Snoke, and there's some obvious correlations between Snoke, what we saw from Snoke in The Last Jedi, the Praetorian Guards in The Last Jedi, and what we've already seen of these new Sith Troopers. And again, we'll talk about these Sith Troopers in detail because I think they look rad. I cannot wait to get my hands on one of these Sith Troopers. I think they look absolutely amazing. Going back to the original trilogy, going then back to the prequel trilogy, and then you get into The Last Jedi, this influence of red, obviously, carries some significance. I had always felt that the name Snoke was odd. Snoke, right? I always thought it was a little strange. I liked it, but I always just kind of, it sat with me weird. And it sat with me weird because I can't help but think of smoke. And when The Force Awakens first came out, I remember seeing on the Reddit leaks page the very first image that they showed of Snoke. And there was a lot of rumors going around prior to the movie coming out that he was a big figure. He was a tall person, larger than life kind of thing. And the very first image that I remember seeing was the holographic image where he was huge, right? And there's a piece of Ralph McQuarrie artwork back from the original trilogy days that has a similar type image of this huge face. And I think he had Vader and maybe Luke standing there with this huge face behind him. And it might have been sort of a piece of concept art for Palpatine at the time. But I even remember even when I saw The Force Awakens, when they first show Snoke, he's in that huge, gigantic holographic form. And I thought that he was actually that big. Right? I thought he was actually that large until it went and disappeared and we realized, oh, it's a hologram, right? But I always thought it was really interesting that J.J. Abrams only showed Snoke as a hologram in that original film. And I always had this really weird sort of, and I'll double back to this, but I always had this really weird sort of Wizard of Oz type vibe. And now that we know we're going to have these Sith Troopers, and now that we know Palpatine is going to play into the Rise of Skywalker, when I went back and watched The Last Jedi last night, I couldn't help but begin to sort of play up that Wizard of Oz idea. You got Snoke sitting there in this throne, very reminiscent of Palpatine. He's in this room with this massive red background that turns out to be what? It's a curtain. Well, that's odd, right? The Praetorian Guards all decked out in red, which was obviously, evoked the images of Palpatine's Red Guards. To me, all of this lends a bit of credibility and speculation around whether or not Snoke was just a puppet for Palpatine this whole time. And he has been behind the scenes pulling the strings, and he didn't know what was going on. Whether or not Snoke was or wasn't aware of this. But all of this sort of carries this sort of idea with it. And it's interesting, too, because Rian Johnson had said that he brought in the Praetorian Guards because he needed these characters for this Reylo moment in that throne room scene, and he didn't want to use the Knights of Ren because he didn't want to go and wipe them out. So instead, what did he do? He created this group of red Praetorian Guards. And what's really fascinating is the fact that these Sith Troopers come with these weapons in the Black Series toys that really do look an awful lot like those Praetorian Guard weapons. And there's a couple different angles here that you can look at. I kind of like this idea that if it was Palpatine kind of pulling the strings in the background, that this was kind of a bad copy of what Palpatine would have been doing. And when we get into The Rise of Skywalker, we're going to go all in on this idea of these Sith Troopers with the red motif, and they're going to have these similar weapons. There's guns that the Sith Troopers have, but they also have these handheld, I don't know. They're not swords. They're kind of like swords, but they look an awful lot like the Praetorian Guard weapons did. And so this seems really interesting to me. I think there's also a big possibility here too, and there's some details in the leaks that we'll get to from MakingStarWars.net about who these Sith Troopers actually receive orders from, and it's Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren, apparently. So this could just be Kylo Ren taking everything a step further. Snoke had his, handful of Praetorian Guards. Well, you know what? Watch this. I've been creating a clone army this whole time. They're my Sith Troopers, and they're way better than those Praetorian Guards ever would have been. All right, moving through a few more of my instinctive reactions from when this news broke. I always had this theory, and I talked about this in many, many shows ago, but I always had this theory that in 9, Kylo would end up feeling sidelined and having to play second fiddle to a new big bad that would arrive, that would put him in a situation where, that he may have to go and join with Rey to defeat this new big bad, because while he thought he was now in power and had achieved the success that he was hoping for, there's another bad guy that ended up showing up and now has decided to sort of knock him down a notch, and that was going to tick him off and he would go against him. And so the idea of Palpatine's return certainly would lend a bit of credibility to that storyline actually coming to fruition. Plus, I had this thought, too, that what if these guards were tied directly to Palpatine, and that was a part of this, and we're going to have this sort of this infighting of factions within the First Order, which is still possible based off of the information that Jason Ward put out for MakingStarWars.net. That doesn't seem to be the case. These troopers seem to be aligned directly with the Knights of Ren and Kylo Ren. Okay, a couple more items. Kylo's helmet. And this isn't, again, directly related to the Sith Troopers. This just kind of brought this idea out to me. There is something going on with Kylo's helmet. And I know that I mentioned this at length before. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on, because I found the quote that I was looking for in the episode where I talked about Kylo's helmet. But there's something going on with Kylo's helmet. There was some concept art that MakingStarWars.net put out that looked like there might have been some concept art of like Vader's castle. And we know from the trailer that there's somebody that's got furry hands that's piecing the helmet back together using this red adhesive. If you lighten up the contrast in that photo, you can see there's a Knight of Ren in the background. However, in all the photos that we've seen so far for The Rise of Skywalker, we haven't seen Kylo with the helmet on. It doesn't appear... Well, we don't know if he has the helmet on in the ship at the opening shot of the trailer. We know in the picture that was shown at Celebration where he appears to be on Pisana walking, he doesn't have the helmet on there. He's not wearing the helmet in the other shots of the trailer. He doesn't have the helmet on for the water lightsaber fight photo from Vanity Fair squaring off against Rey, and I think the speculation that there actually is a figure in between those two while they're allegedly battling in the rain and water on top of a destroyed Death Star 2 on the forest moon of Endor. I think there's something to be said that there's potentially a character in between there. He doesn't have the helmet on. Why is that significant? That's significant because of that pendant leak that we had a couple months back, where it was a artistic rendition, almost something like you would find on a shield, of Rey squaring off against what we think is Kylo Ren with what appears to be water in the background. That would seem to lend itself to the end of the film and that shot that we saw from the Vanity Fair image, right? But in the Vanity Fair image, Kylo Ren's not wearing that helmet. And in that image in the pendant, the helmet is on. I think there is something going on with that helmet. I think there's something going on significant with that helmet. And I'll jump ahead here for just a moment, and let me grab this quote, because I went back and found it, because I knew that I had read this before. But going back to Slash Film and the release of before the release of The Force Awakens, there was a whole article written about how the back of Kylo Ren's helmet was finally revealed. And we hadn't just seen the flaring out of the back of Kylo Ren's helmet before this. And one of the toys got out, and they were focusing on that and saying how it looked like Vader's helmet, this kind of thing. J.J. Abrams was quoted as saying this: "The movie explains the origins of the mask and where it's from." He was talking about The Force Awakens. He said in an interview, "The movie explains the origins of the mask and where it's from." Does anybody remember that? Because I sure as heck don't. And I remember when I first read that quote from JJ, and I was kind of like, really? Cool. I want to know where he got it from. And we never found out. I think there's something to that. I think we didn't find out for a reason. I think they held back on some of these things that are going to be revealed now in The Rise of Skywalker because J.J. Abrams is directing it. So what does it mean? I don't know yet. I think there's a possibility that the helmet has some connection to Palpatine. I also think there's a possibility that maybe Kylo Ren doesn't put that helmet on. Maybe somebody else does. Maybe this is the Matt Smith character. Maybe the helmet is not being reforged for Kylo Ren. Like, here's a scenario. I'm just going to toss it out there. Here's a scenario. And I've speculated about this before, that at some point in the first half of the film, Kylo Ren decides to befriend Rey, knowing that there is a larger threat out there that even threatens what he wanted to do with the galaxy, and that it's futile to go up against it. So he decides to partner up with Rey to end whatever this new threat is. Potentially it's Palpatine. Okay. What if that helmet is directly tied to Palpatine? And what if Kylo Ren splits from the Knights of Ren, but the Knights of Ren still want to make sure that they can command the armies that they've built? So they get the helmet reforged and give it to somebody else to wear who can act like they're Kylo Ren. And I know that Kylo Ren is on the packaging with the helmet. That's going to be the packaging for the toys and the merchandise. It's a stylized, painting, drawing of Kylo Ren with his hand and the helmet. On the promotional poster, we certainly saw Kylo Ren wearing the helmet with the tri-lightsaber, right? So I'm not saying he doesn't ever wear it, but there is something fishy going on with that helmet. And there's a reason why it was specifically shown in the trailer of being reforged and there was a Knight of Ren behind it. And I just find the fact that that battle is supposed to allegedly be towards the end of the film on the Death Star 2. It may not be, but that pendant showed Rey squaring off against Kylo Ren with the helmet on, and in that photo he doesn't have the helmet. Of course, there's a bunch of different possibilities that could go into that mean absolutely nothing to anything that I'm saying right now. I just think that there's something there that we're going to end up getting some more information on. All right, one more bit of sort of instinctive reaction, and that is, Sith Trooper. Obviously, that's a big deal, right? To bring it back with the Sith. Nobody seems to be pointing this out, though. Imperial. In the press release for the Sith Trooper, it says, this is the new Sith Trooper, part of the Imperial / First Order Army. Where did Imperial come from? All right, so I did a little digging, and obviously Imperial was associated with the original trilogy and the Empire. This is where the timeline kind of comes into play potentially, based off of how much time has been in between The Last Jedi and the rise of Skywalker. But Imperial just means like a large organization, right? So when you watch the beginning of The Last Jedi, one of the opening lines on the crawl is, "The First Order reigns." So I'm envisioning a scenario where that hasn't changed, right? When we pick up in The Last Jedi, it's right after The Force Awakens. So that still remains clear by the time we get to the end of the film. There really hasn't been anything done to the First Order to diminish their ability to wage war on the galaxy. So if at the beginning of The Last Jedi, the First Order reigns, and we get more than a year, and it could just be a year, and perhaps these clones of, or these Sith Troopers, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I do think they're clones, but again, these Sith Troopers have been out there all along, okay? It would make sense that by the time we get to the Rise of Skywalker, we're in a situation when it comes to the First Order closer to what we had at the start of the original trilogy, where the Empire's forces now had spread across the galaxy and were controlling most of the galaxy, and that's what the rebellion was fighting against. By the time we get to the Rise of Skywalker, we could have a similar situation where the First Order has now gained enough control of the systems within the galaxy that they now have a foothold, much like the Empire did, which is why they now have this Imperial title where they didn't before. And it seems like people kind of miss this. There's so many little things that take place within these movies and sort of one-off lines that really do give some clues as to what's happening. But you go back to The Force Awakens and remember, we're watching the sort of opening attack from the First Order and taking control of the galaxy with wiping out the Hosnian Prime system in the Republic. And I know there's complaints that whole little scenario was glossed over way too quickly. I can understand that. But that was a really important moment within this sequel trilogy. That showed how far the First Order was willing to go and how they decimated the New Republic and now had the ability to go and start taking over systems. We certainly saw that in the cartoon Resistance, where they're more benevolent, right? More acting like they're going to help individuals as they go and try to take over different parts of the galaxy. And just as a reminder, throughout the show this week, I'll be repeating some different themes and ideas that I've jotted down in my notes. So you may find that I'm going to be saying a couple of these things a few times, but it's mostly just the nature of when I was note-taking and I was adding in some of these different thoughts and ideas that I had after the reveal of the Sith Trooper. One more quick item that ended up coming out in the wake of this reveal of the Sith Trooper, and then we'll dive into the MakingStarWars.net article about what they believe is going on with these Sith Troopers. But somebody went into this book of the Sith that I mentioned, and I want to read to you a quote here. Jedi assassination, but the mind can be preserved. And my understanding is that this is Palpatine talking, okay? Through the art of dark transfer, I will move myself to a younger body, cloned from my own cells. Now, if this isn't Palpatine talking in the Book of the Sith, please let me know. My understanding was that this was Palpatine talking in the Book of the Sith. I will achieve immortality, even if I am killed. I will return from the chaos of non-being to restored physical life. This, even my master could not achieve. I knew it was so when I halted his breathing and watched the light vanish from his eyes. He sought the secret of life to live forever, but I took his life, and I remain the ultimate Sith. I think there's a huge possibility that this is where J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio could have potentially drawn from in order to bring Palpatine back, and it might have been the idea all along. Or maybe the idea was to bring Palpatine back all along, but they ended up zeroing in on this. And remember, the Force Skyping that took place in The Last Jedi was actually talked about before in the non-canon Jedi journals. This was a power that Jedi could have to go and do this. Not only that, but also the ability that Luke had, more specifically, to go and project himself to another location. That was a power that Jedi did have. Somebody had quoted in an interview, and I don't know where it was, talking about, it might have been Daisy Ridley. And oh yeah, there's an interesting one from Daisy Ridley that I'll talk about here in a moment. I don't have the audio, but I'll share it with you. But I believe it was Daisy Ridley said, talking about the story for The Rise of Skywalker and Chris Terrio, that Chris Terrio had all of these Star Wars Bibles that he was educating himself on and was really getting into specific details of a lot of published works about Star Wars and educating himself further, which got me really, really excited. It feels like they really did their homework when it comes to even legend lore, which, you know, Disney has been doing all along with the new Star Wars content and bringing it into the world of canon. So it would not surprise me at all that this passage of I will achieve immortality even if I'm killed, I will move myself to a younger body cloned from my own cells, if this ends up being the mechanism of which Palpatine does return. And of course, this plays right into what I talked about a few episodes ago of the potential of body jumping, and obviously we're getting into alleged leaks here for those that missed it and hadn't figured it out already. I probably should have put the warning out, but if you've been listening to the show long enough,
the hyperdrive is leaking.
You know that I'm quick to go and talk about some stuff that's been leaked out there. All right, one more quick comment, and then we'll get into this MakingStarWars.net article. Again, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment up on YouTube. So Daisy Ridley was making the rounds for Ophelia we've been talking about the past few weeks. There's a really fun, 10-minute video of it's Daisy Ridley, and she's got this computer clicker. She's standing in front of the screen, and they're talking about her internet presence, and it's got a bunch of data relating to Google searches. There's a really cute moment with Daisy where she's watching this individual training with a lightsaber, just a stunt woman, and she's blown away by how good this stunt woman is. There's a fascinating moment, though, in the video, and it made me kind of go, what? It made me absolutely gasp. Daisy Ridley is asked about the most searched characters that along with her. So what other characters from Star Wars are searched along with Daisy Ridley the most? And she gives her guesses, and then she starts clicking through, and the photos of the actors begin showing up. And the first one that shows up is John Boyega, and she calls him, here she goes, "Oh, my peanut." The next one that pops up is Adam Driver. And what's the first thing that comes out of Daisy Ridley's mouth? She says, "Oh, the grumpy Dark Lord." Burn? Excuse me? The grumpy Dark Lord? Okay, so for those that, I know there's I know there's you out there that are going, what? If you hadn't heard that yet, and you're getting immediately what I'm driving at, and there's others kind of going, what are you talking about? Okay, what I'm talking about is, I went and looked, and I don't see anywhere, unless it's in one of the books, where, unless it's in the books that I haven't seen, or it's in articles not written by Disney and Lucasfilm talking about Kylo Ren. But I don't see anywhere in canon where Kylo Ren is referred to a Dark Lord in any way. A Dark Lord, when it comes to Star Wars lore, in my opinion, is tied directly to Sith. And again, if I'm wrong and missing something, please. I know you'll be quick to go and correct me, but I was like, did Snoke say that? I don't remember that. I know that in the, other films, Dark Lord of the Sith, that's just a thing. So, if it hasn't been mentioned within any of the canon of the films, I don't think that Daisy Ridley is reading a ton of articles that have talked about Kylo Ren, in which the article headlines will talk about, him being a Dark Lord, but that's not mentioned in the actual canon. So, if that's the case, she had to go and pull that from somewhere, right? That's not a term, in my opinion. I know she's an actress, and I know that she's playing this pivotal role in the sequel to the Star Wars trilogy, but you and I both realize, unless you're John Boyega, those actors and actresses aren't fans like we are. They're not just pulling out Dark Lord from nowhere. So I would love to get your thoughts on that, because I thought that was incredibly revealing. And it's something to me that if she heard in reference to the rise of Skywalker and him being a Dark Lord, perhaps that is an indication of the full return of the Sith, or him embracing the Sith religion where he hadn't before. It's something that she probably wouldn't have thought twice about, thinking that it wasn't a big deal, when in reality, it could be like the massive slip of the tongue clue that, oh yeah, indeed. I mean, beyond Sith Trooper, right? Okay. I just thought that was fascinating. Would love to know what you thought. Talkshownerd@gmail.com, or as you can always leave a comment up on YouTube. All right, so after the reveal of the Sith Trooper, Jason Ward put out an article immediately on makingstarwars.net, covering the very issue, because he talked about Sith Troopers at length in the past. He says this: for the last year, there had been interesting rumors I had picked up about the new Red Stormtroopers, which would be in Episode 9, before we knew it was called The Rise of Skywalker. When I first heard about them, it was just that they were red. And then the quote here is: another rumor I've heard a few times pertains to those Red Troopers I wrote about some time ago. I've heard that the Red Troopers are called Sith Troopers, but later we learned they were called Sith once filming was underway. Then the Sith part was actually disputed by crew members who said they weren't calling them that on the set. On the Star Wars show, they confirmed that they are, in fact, Sith Troopers. For source security reasons, I can't report what they were called on the set at the moment. You can read about how to buy this merchandise at StarWars.com. One of the more concrete elements I had heard about the Troopers is that they only answer to Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren in the film, and that has some plot significance. I don't know the significance yet, but I'm guessing General Hux is going to be sending these guys to Burger King unless Kylo Ren and the Knights give the order. It looks like their accessories are very much in line of the Praetorian Guards from The Last Jedi as well. I do like the overall emergence of this red armor in the trilogy in total now. There's an old story on them, if you haven't and you're avoiding spoilers, but it's nice to always see old reports pan out, as always, even if it's cooler when you're excited about these rumors and the ideas as a fan. I'm digging the concepts of the Red Troopers, ended up looking so good. I didn't really like the old Black Stormtroopers from the comics and stuff, but I like the Death Troopers. I had a Red Stormtrooper Black Series figure from Entertainment Earth, and it was just okay. However, these, however, are beyond okay, and it's pretty rad. These things do look pretty rad. If you look closely at these Sith Troopers, they've got more angles to their armor. They have these textured lines, these ridges. They look like corduroy on the armor throughout the helmet, right? And on the on the body armor that goes along with it. And I don't think that it is any mistake or coincidence that the helmet face looks just like the helmet faces of the last clone troopers that we saw from Revenge of the Sith. I think they absolutely look that way because I think these guys are clones. And I think that goes back to J.J. Abrams putting the comment in of the clone army at the beginning of The Force Awakens. When we're talking about connecting all of these films, it makes all the sense in the world Snoke wanted to see, and here's the thing: Snoke wanted to create a clone army. Maybe we should do that because you're to General Hux, right? Your guy got away. Maybe we should consider the use of a clone army. If Kylo Ren's now in charge and Snoke's gone, and he's like, I'm going to go ahead and follow up what Snoke did. I'm going to go ahead and bring in some clones. I'm going to go ahead and embrace the Sith. I'm going to call them Sith Troopers, and these guys are going to be my new army. I think there's a lot of credibility that says that's the case. I will share with you at the end of the regular portion of the show this week, before we get into listener feedback, I will share with you the rumors and speculation about Episode 9 and the threat of the Knights of Ren as it relates to the Sith Troopers. This gets into spoiler territory that I want to make sure you have the option of pitching off of if you want to. So again, I'll save this for right before the listener feedback portion of the show. All right, so more thoughts from the host here this week. First off, getting back to Imperial again. Imperial, again, relates to an empire. So maybe more time has gone by than what we were told between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. And now the First Order has expanded their reach to the point where they're now calling themselves Imperial because it's more of an empire now. Sith Troopers are not new to Star Wars legend. You go back to the Knights of the Old Republic video game, and we had Sith Troopers that look an awful lot, honestly. I mean, they were red, but again, they do look an awful lot, minus the helmet, to the Sith Troopers that we're seeing that'll be in The Rise of Skywalker. In Knights of the Old Republic, these were Darth Revan's troopers. And again, there are many of them on that promotional poster. I heard some commentary, and again, this goes back to kind of the cynicism that I heard from so many people, of people just saying, well, they're probably just going to be like the Death Troopers and probably aren't going to have a very big part of the movie, and I don't want to get too excited. And it's probably just one guy like Phasma, and they're just doing it to sell toys. And look, that might be true. I just don't understand how that's fun to go and speculate that way, to be so cynical. I'd rather go the other route and act like these guys are a big deal, because I actually think they are. You look at that promo poster, and there's a whole bunch of them on there. I think they're going to play a massive significance, and I don't know about you, but seeing a whole army of red Sith Troopers going to battle just sounds amazing, absolutely amazing to me. And again, I think this relates to the poster. Somebody put together a great side-by-side shot of one of the promotional pictures for, might have even been done by the same artist, one of the promotional pictures for Attack of the Clones, and put it up next to the promotional poster that got leaked, which we all know now is legit. We knew back then too, but people didn't want to accept it. The Attack of the Clones poster had Jango Fett front and center, and then it had all the clone troopers behind him, right? And this one had one Sith trooper front and center, and all the other Sith Troopers behind him, and they really looked very, very similar. The Sith symbol, again, this has been used for a while now. Is this Kylo Ren? And if these Sith Troopers are Kylo Ren's minions, is this more of Kylo Ren fanboying? Right? Not boying, being a fanboy to Vader, being that wannabe that he was portrayed to be in that first film. And I think it's a smart move to go back and look at what J.J. Abrams did in The Force Awakens and try to glean some insight into what he's going to end up doing in The Rise of Skywalker, because in The Force Awakens, there was that running joke as kind of an emo Kylo Ren. He's kind of a wannabe. So, to me, being rejected by the girl he has this amazing connection with that drives him further to the dark side to the point where he pulls out the Sith moniker, creates a whole group of clone troopers to go along with it, calls them Sith Troopers, right? It's the ultimate sort of fanboy acknowledgement to him trying to be Darth Vader. And also, this is, when it comes to the Sith itself, and I've seen a lot of commentary about this too, people seem to get sort of stuck on this. Well, the Sith, it's just one and another. There's always just a master and an apprentice, right? Okay, the Sith was an ancient order. That is true. There always is a master and an apprentice, and we won't get into the whole chosen one and the prophecy and all that of removing the Sith and all that. But it was an ancient order. There was, in the books laid out before, a large Sith ancient order that had a lot of Sith involved even though you still had the sort of master and apprentice part of it. Okay, here's one more interesting one, too. Rise of Skywalker and Newsweek. Newsweek did an article about the Rise of Skywalker in the wake of the Vanity Fair piece. And they quoted in Newsweek from the Vanity Fair article. I really went wonky on that. I could have just gone right to the Vanity Fair article, I suppose. But I found it via the Newsweek website. J.J. Abrams had this to say about what was going to happen in The Rise of Skywalker. And keep in mind, too, that we have comments from Oscar Isaac talking about the guerrilla warfare in The Rise of Skywalker. John Boyega has made comments to it being all-out war. But J.J. Abrams said in Vanity Fair about how the First Order was really like Nazis. It's almost like the Argentina Nazis after the end of World War II, right, when Germany lost. A lot of the Nazis fled to Argentina. And JJ's mentioned this before. And he's likened the First Order to, in The Force Awakens and the sequel trilogy, to kind of like if the Nazis had gone down to Argentina and then regrouped and actually started to come back in some real form. So there's a real easy sort of explanation that you can go to that says perhaps these Sith Troopers have been out there this whole time, we just haven't seen them yet. And it's more of the First Order emerging from the shadows, and maybe, just maybe, Palpatine's been connected to them all along. All right, so let's run through some more points that I want to make here. And again, as I sort of give out these details and spark your thought process, feel free to email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube. Going back to Snoke again, Wizard of Oz behind a curtain, only a hologram in the first film. Snoke's goal and Kylo's goal, also on top of revenge because of what Luke did when he was training him, right, was to find Luke and eliminate the threat of the Jedi rising. A new Jedi will rise. That was the motivation of that first movie. And I know that for me, that kind of gets lost along with the message, right? The plans, the map of where Luke Skywalker was that kind of runs through the middle of the plot. It's kind of all takes a back seat to the main story of Rey and her meeting Kylo Ren. But the core of the story was Snoke and Kylo Ren wanting to find Luke. Why do they want to find Luke? Because they were rising to power as the dark side, and they wanted to make sure they got rid of Luke so they didn't have any kind of Jedi threat. The light rises, right? The darkness rises and the light to meet it. Lore Santeca. Without the Jedi, there can be no balance. Luke, at the beginning of The Last Jedi, was under the impression that the Jedi needed to end the conflict. He was wrong. Yoda shows up to tell him about what a great teacher failure is, and then Luke decides to go and help Rey to clear the way for the new Jedi. There's got to be some focus on balance in this whole thing. And what better way to go and balance out and end this 9-movie saga than to have the two main dual protagonists, dark and light characters, come together to face one ultimate evil and ultimately then bring balance to the Force. Okay? Again, I'll mention, Kylo's speech to Rey was the anomaly. Okay? He was essentially pulling an Anakin, I can overthrow him, and you and I can rule the galaxy, making it the way you want it to be. And by the end of The Last Jedi, what was he doing? I will have killed the last Jedi. Okay, so what does all this mean? In my opinion, what it means is, it makes all the sense in the world, going back to the Sith Trooper, that as we head into The Rise of Skywalker, we've had all this focus on the Jedi, right? The Jedi were real. Luke is the last Jedi. Snoke wants to go and hunt down Luke so a new Jedi can't rise. But what's been missing from this equation? The Sith have been missing from this equation. The Sith have been the major threat all along. And this is not it's not like it's the first time that we've been in this place when it comes to Star Wars where we didn't necessarily have all the right definitions for people. My point is, we weren't talking a whole heck of a lot about the Sith during the original trilogy films. Certainly that was a focus in the prequel trilogy. But in the original trilogy, it was just dark and light and Jedi. So for me, it makes all the sense in the world that Rey got away. She obviously has more Force power. We know that from the interviews heading into the Rise of Skywalker. Okay, she's embracing this idea of being a Jedi. Luke says it at the end of The Last Jedi. So it makes sense to me that Kylo Ren's motivation at this time is, if I'm going to rule and I'm going to take these people down, I got to bring back that ancient order that was there all along fighting against the light side and the Jedi. I can't do it without embracing that. And maybe that's what the Knights of Ren end up realizing. And maybe that's what we all end up being told from the get-go of the Rise of Skywalker. That Kylo Ren thinks that his way to victory is to go and embrace the ancient order, go fully dark side, fully Sith. But unfortunately, perhaps his plans get thwarted, I don't know what that is, thwarted, because Palpatine shows up and ends up ruining that because he wants to take it an even step further, and Kylo realizes the mistake all along, and his connection with Rey is of greater significance and importance than ruling the galaxy is. TalkShowNerd at gmail.com, and also leave me a comment on YouTube. Before we get to the MakingStarWars.net leak story, and then we get to listener feedback, and I'll try to give you a good time frame here of how you can go and skip forward. I want to mention one more thing really quick. Somebody had posted a photo of Rey and a shot of Rey from the trailer for The Rise of Skywalker. And they quoted underneath that the 1,000 generations live in you now. And they presented that with this question of, does this mean that she's the new chosen one? Okay, I only bring that up because it was that photo and that little commentary. It doesn't mean that. But that photo and that commentary got me thinking about something that I wanted to share with you. We have this character, Zori Bliss, that's in The Rise of Skywalker, played by Kerry Russell. Don't know who she's playing yet. We know there's some significance. She's going to be on this planet where the snow is potentially, and part of this den of thieves or something like this. I think there's a big possibility that one of the reveals in the film is going to be that Rey is a child of the Force in the same way that Anakin Skywalker was. And I've felt this has been a possibility for a long time. I think that it would be smart for Disney to set up a scenario where this is the kind of thing that happens when it comes to the Force. Is that when the darkness begins to rise, the Force responds with the light to go and meet it. It doesn't always happen that way, but sometimes the Force ends up manifesting itself with a new prophecy and somebody who's born of the Force. And that's not to say that I necessarily think that Zori Bliss is the mother, but I think it's possible that Zori Bliss knows Rey's background. We saw that ship in the trailer heading to the location where we believe that character is supposed to be, that looks just like the ship that left Jakku when Rey was a child in the Forceback sequence. I think the possibility here is that she meets this Zori Bliss character. Maybe that's her ship. Maybe she transports individuals, and then we end up finding out, as Daisy Ridley said in an interview, the dealio, and the dealio turns out to be that she didn't have a dad. She was born of the Force to, a virgin birth to a mom who did end up, because she was scared, selling her off for drinking money and leaving her on Jakku. And the Rise of Skywalker might just be the fact that when she finds that out, by the time we get to the end of the film, she does end up adopting the Skywalker name and becomes Rey Skywalker because of the fact that she didn't really have any parents. I think that's a huge, huge possibility. Just wanted to throw that speculation out there and curious to know what you think. Again, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or you can go and drop me a comment on YouTube. All right, as we head into exactly the 1 hour mark, I'm going to give a 3-minute warning here, okay? So if you don't want to hear the story here from MakingStarWars.net on the threat of the Knights of Ren, and this goes back to February of this year, then skip ahead about 3 minutes, and we'll kick off the listener feedback portion of the show. That way you won't end up being spoiled beyond what you want to be spoiled by. So again, skip ahead 3 minutes from right about now.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
All right, so Jason Ward says this. Some time ago, I spoke to a source about Star Wars Episode 9 who told me that things get interesting for Kylo Ren when a threat from the beyond reveals itself, making Kylo vulnerable. This threat would serve as a motivating factor for Kylo Ren and Rey's interaction as the story progressed, but the source wasn't sure which act it happened in or how it unfolded. It should be noted that a lot of that source told me in terms of accuracy has come to fruition since that conversation. However, with that info in hand, it's understandable, but the knee-jerk reactions from some fans likely would have gone right to the expanded universe. I think now we know if there is credibility to this, it actually means it's Palpatine. Very recently, another source with a great track record said it was really important that the Knights of Ren have returned from the beyond. The pregnant pause after that bit of information has led me to believe there's a lot to that. The fact that there's some plot significance to the Knights of Ren in the film is something else most sources also echoed. Another rumor I heard a few times pertains to those Red Troopers. Sith Troopers, behind the scenes. Let's see. Now, are they called that behind the scenes because Kylo Ren is actually a Sith Lord now? This goes back into Grumpy Dark Lord. Or do we have some game of synonyms at play where evil is just the name of Sith? Anyways, the pertinent info here is that the Red Troopers only answer to Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren exclusively. Maybe they're just the Knights of Ren infantry. It also seems that in Episode 9, Kylo has accumulated private armies and militias under the First Order banner to strengthen the opposition to his rule. This could play into the whole Imperial part of it, right? Worlds that have their own defense forces are also aligned with the First Order, so it sounds like the scope of the battles in the film could be pretty large and not just the rebellion fighting against white stormtroopers. Do these rumors connect? Let us speculate that they do, and they really might connect like this. It would seem Kylo Ren is putting together a large force to dominate the galaxy. But the first rumor says that a threat from the beyond eventually reunites Kylo Ren with Rey. Maybe the Knights of Ren are like the Sith. Perhaps the number 2 person of power in the Knights Order knows that they have to kill Kylo to become the supreme leader, right? And things get out of hand for Kylo and the Knights of Ren, now generals of the First Order, and they try to usurp the Supreme Leader, just like Kylo Ren did in The Last Jedi. This is pure speculation on my part, but if the rumors are accurate, that could potentially be how things connect together. Remember, these are real rumors that have come with information that has been validated by various aspects of Star Wars on screen, so the rumors themselves have some validity. The connective tissue between them was speculation on how they connect, assuming all of the building blocks of that narrative have seemed pretty accurate so far.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, so full disclosure moment. In the middle of recording this week's show, this is Saturday. Well, it was Saturday morning. It's now Saturday afternoon. My 12-year-old Kyle hasn't been feeling very well. He deals with a lot of allergies. So in the middle of the show, you've probably heard like my phone going off, and I just didn't have things muted the way that I thought that I did. He was asking me if I wanted to join him when he was going to eat lunch and watch a movie. And so I had texted him back, and I said, hey, listen, I'm about an hour into The Last Jedi. Got about an hour and a half left. Do you want to watch that? Much to my surprise, he said yes. So I paused the show, went and finished watching The Last Jedi, and now I'm back. This is really cool, though, and I didn't plan on doing this, and I am going to get to listener feedback because this was not, again, part of the plan in recording the show today. This was really cool, though, and I'm glad I have this moment to share with you guys on the show, in that I sat down with Kyle, he's 12, and then my wife Melinda made lunch, and she decided to come sit down and watch. And then my 17-year-old, as he was getting ready to go to work, he made lunch, and so all of us ended up sitting down and watching the rest of The Last Jedi together, pretty much from the Canto Bight scene forward. I backed it up to the you didn't betray Kylo Ren, Kylo Ren betrayed you moment between Luke and Rey. And then when we were done, I put on the Rise of Skywalker trailer and just walked right back downstairs to record the rest of the podcast. And I can't express enough how enjoyable. That just made my weekend. It absolutely made my weekend. Watching the movie with my family and talking about it and just enjoying Star Wars together. I mean, that's what this is all about. And it's a moment that I'm glad I had the opportunity. I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. It's a running theme for a reason, and everything happening for a reason is the running theme in my Embark novels. It's the force of my Embark story. That's why I created it. It's something that I personally believe in, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do that and then come back and finish up the show and go through listener feedback. I adore that movie. I love that movie so much. It is such a piece of art, in my opinion, and such a masterpiece. And being able to go enjoy it with the family was amazing. And the fact that I get to come back, wrap up the show, still have a lot to get to. Got a lot of listener feedback to get to, but come back and continue doing the show just makes it all the more special. All right, one more quick item, and then I promise I'll get to listener feedback because I did play the intro. But this was in the notes. And I wanted to share it with you because it's Star Wars related. Apparently, Kanye West the rapper, is reportedly in development of low-income housing units inspired by Star Wars architecture. According to Forbes, the rapper, designer, and entrepreneur is in the midst of creating housing units that resemble what Luke Skywalker lived in on Tatooine in A New Hope. Inspired by Luke Skywalker's childhood home, West has been working with a team to design prefabricated structures that sport the same austere aesthetic with the goal of deploying them as low-income housing units. He tells me that they could be used for living spaces for the homeless, perhaps sunk into the ground with light filtering through the top, describing the structures as each oblong and dozens of feet tall. West apparently has an upcoming meeting in San Francisco with potential investors. I did not know this, but West is apparently a well-known Star Wars fan, often dropping mentions of his films in his lyrics. So interesting note, pretty cool. Don't know how it'll work out, but good for Kanye West. Always happy to see Star Wars fans of all types, right? Even rapper Kanye West.
My nerd world.
All right. talkshownerd@gmail.com. Also YouTube. You can leave comments. Got a lot to get to for the show this week. We'll start off with Across the Stars. If Reylo doesn't happen, and a lot of this is obviously in reference to last week's show, if not Reylo, then what? But if Reylo doesn't happen, then I will have no idea what this trilogy is even supposed to be about. Watching The Last Jedi and then that trailer, by the way, I don't know why it hit me, but I got a sneaking suspicion that final shot with the group of our heroes standing there on that cliff overlooking the water and the Death Star 2 off in the distance, I'm of the mindset that Kylo Ren is in that shot. I know people have talked about it. There's sort of a random rock that's off to the right. I think Kylo Ren's in that shot. Just going to throw that out there. All right. Kelly writes this. If Reylo doesn't happen, then just what was the point of the red string of fate? Balance their characters meeting and having all that sexual tension. Yeah, I know. I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. She goes on to say, let's see. Ben is a Skywalker. This is in response to somebody else's comment, and we'll get to their comment here in a moment, talking about Rey and Ben and who's a Skywalker and who isn't. Ben is a Skywalker. Luke even said in The Last Jedi, my nephew with that mighty Skywalker blood. Now, I'm going to jump ahead to a comment here from Ray 1. This is in response, and there was a bit of a back and forth going on YouTube. But Ray 1 writes this. Jon Justice, my nerd world, with all due respect, I don't need you or Miss Ridley or anyone else to point out the obvious. Clearly, Ben Solo, right? He is the grandson of Anakin Skywalker, which would make him a Skywalker, if only by blood relation. My point is simply that if the title is directly in reference to him, that would be kind of silly since his last name is Solo. It would be like someone writing a book about you rather than using your last name, which I'll assume is your father's last name. They instead chose to use your mother's last name. Also consider Ben himself didn't even choose to take on the Skywalker designation after rejecting his father's name, but rather opted for Kylo Ren. So again, to me, it just wouldn't make sense for the title to be about him. And in light of this epic lightsaber battle that is allegedly going down, I doubt very seriously he's going to have a sudden turn at the end, but we shall see. Yeah, look, it's all speculation at this point, right? And everybody's entitled to their opinion. I disagree. I tend to believe that the Rise of Skywalker and the Skywalker in the Rise of Skywalker is going to be something more overarching and not necessarily specific, like as a whole, right? I think there are a lot of different ways this can work that can include it meaning Ben Solo as a Skywalker, but also something larger than that. And I'll give you a loose example, and this is just based off my own books, but the second book in my Embark trilogy, and I'm going to write a lot more books, but in my core first trilogy of stories, my second book is called Treasure in Darkness. And I will tell you that the title is obviously in reference to the book, but it's also very vague and can mean multiple things with regard to the story that I've written. And that's what I wanted. I wanted something sort of ambiguous that people can kind of go and lean into and go, okay, I can see why it's called Treasure in Darkness. Or not even just sort of passive, but more like, I can absolutely see why it's called Treasure in Darkness because of this reason, but it also could be because of this reason. Okay, and that's just personal experience. All right, let's go and talk with a friend of the show, or I should say, we'll hear from friend of the show, JW. What are your thoughts on the hybrid Anakin Force Ghost sequence that is rumored to be in The Rise of Skywalker? Do you agree with the idea that Anakin could end up evil again, or do you believe that this is just nonsense that won't actually be in the movie? I haven't heard this particular rumor with that. I do believe, I am of the opinion that we will see Anakin Skywalker in some way, shape, or form in the film. I also think there's a big possibility in how this could work. There's a big possibility. I was thinking about this the other day. A lot of people are pointing to, going back to Rey 1's comment and the title, The Rise of Skywalker. I think that there's something to be said in The Rise of Skywalker isn't referring to the rise of Luke Skywalker, but maybe the rise of Anakin Skywalker. Perhaps there is a return of Anakin Skywalker in some way, shape, or form that comes in at the end of this film to close it out and defeat evil once and for all. I really like that idea. I don't know exactly how it would work, but the thought of at the end of this film with Kylo Ren and Rey being the balance and struggling to defeat the ultimate evil, that Anakin Skywalker would show up in some way, shape, or form, maybe as a Force Ghost, or maybe in some capacity we haven't seen when it comes to Force Ghosts or those that have transformed into the Force, to have Anakin Skywalker, Hayden Christensen, show back up at the end of this film to help them in their quest. I found it interesting, by the way, and I thought about this as well, thinking about this theory of Anakin Skywalker returning in some way, shape, or form, played by Hayden Christensen, because he looks fantastic for his age right now, and they could easily just de-age him just a skosh to make him look just like he did at the end of Return of the Jedi in the Force Ghost scene. But there's something interesting about the opening shot of the trailer for The Rise of Skywalker, where Luke says, actually, you know what? I won't say it. I'll go ahead and I'll play it since I have the audio here. Here we go.
We've passed on all we know. 1,000 generations live in you now. But this is your fight.
The thing that I keep going back to with This Is Your Fight, it reminds me very much of Obi-Wan Kenobi to Luke, or Qui-Gon Jinn, right, to Padme. We can help you. We can't fight a war for you. Obi-Wan Kenobi at the end of A New Hope. Look, I can't help you. You got to do this on your own. And Luke saying that to Rey conjures up a similar feeling with that. All right, Mitzi K says this. I just recently started watching Rebels. I just recently started rewatching Rebels, and my gosh, I love that cartoon. My Star Wars super nerd brother, who is now coming to agree with me on how Episode 9 is going to go. Before he was sure Rey and Ben were twins, big eye roll for me, which I teased him endlessly, suggested I should watch the Clone War. I should watch after the Clone Wars in preparation for the end of the Star Wars and Skywalker saga. Really enjoying a lot more Clone Wars, although Ahsoka is amazing. Great show as always. Thank you, Mitzi K. I appreciate that. Let's see. Rotorzilla says this. It's gonna get salty. Salt. I honestly don't see. Did you find? I don't see. I think they meant to say I don't see what you found so appealing about The Last Jedi. For character development, for storytelling or military tactics. I don't know what for character development. Maybe they meant poor character development. Your mama jokes to make the First Order look like the Keystone Cops. They're not threatening or frightening, even a menace. The Canto Bight subplot is an incredible waste. Rose stopping Finn, I'm taking out the cannon was an incredible waste. It finally stopped running, was going to do something to save his friends, only to have it taken away from him. Boy, no offense, Rotozilla, you write worse than I do. Sorry. Sorry, that's why I have Grammarly. And at the end, Rey, R-A-Y, is just R-E-Y, Rey, lifting rocks and saving the day. Okay, I'll just say this. Look, it's subjective. I disagree with all that. Even watching The Last Jedi today and looking at some of the goofier moments of the film, every single Star Wars movie has those. As a matter of fact, The Force Awakens, honestly, was the one Star Wars movie that had less of it, to a certain extent, sort of the goofiness. But you go back over the other films, they all had goofiness. I mean, I could go through the list. I mean, certainly in the prequels, right? But even in the original trilogy, there's so much goofiness in Return of the Jedi, it's not even funny. And to me, and I know people have complained about this, but to me, the humor in The Last Jedi pairs right up with the humor in all the other films. Now, could you have taken out some of the humor in the other films, right? The guy crying over the Rancor beast dying. You know, Snoodles. Luke always thinking with your, Chewie always thinking with your stomach. I mean, look, the list goes on and on and on. Could you have removed those from the other films and made it less goofy? Sure. But I love the films for those things. And to me, what Rian Johnson did with The Last Jedi is right on par with those other films. I think the problem that Rian Johnson had is, in The Last Jedi has had, not that I want to go down on this tangent, but the problem that Rian Johnson ran into with The Last Jedi is the fact that we do live in an interconnected world where everybody has the opportunity to share every single thought on their mind at every moment in time. The other films, if they lived in the social networking world we live in right now, would be ripped just as hard as The Last Jedi was for all the similar reasons. In my opinion, Rian Johnson made an amazing Star Wars movie, currently my favorite Star Wars movie, that is right on par on so many different beats with the other films. Right in the same line. And I know that we live in a realm where we're taking this stuff more seriously, and perhaps the older generations aren't as into the jokes like younger kids are. But remember, at the end of the day, these are for younger kids, even though The Last Jedi is the most adult of them. But my 12-year-old son was laughing right along with all the goofy jokes in the movie. Okay? And that's what it's supposed to do. By the way, quick side note, the end of that film, the crate battle going into Luke and Kylo's standoff, so incredible. That crate battle is so incredible. Just so good. I want to go watch it again. J.J. Williams says this: I almost couldn't get past the fact, John, you hadn't seen Goonies before. Dude, enjoyed season 3 of Stranger Things 2, but yes, if not Reylo, then what? JJ set Reylo in motion. Great podcast. Yeah, and I did finally watch Goonies, by the way. Really enjoyed it. That was a lot of fun. Let's see. Shock Fitness, friend of the show. Star Wars was dead when I was a kid. I'm 39, and when I was a kid / a teen in the 90s, the franchise was dead in terms of no new theatrical content. So I guess I'm just grateful. I'm right there with you, Shock Fitness. I'm just grateful Star Wars movies are being made again, so I don't spend my time complaining and disrespecting every perceived flaw. I was thrilled in the late 90s when I heard about the prequels being made, and I still am today. You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, and maybe that's where my attitude towards Star Wars comes from. Maybe that's it. But I've loved this franchise since I was a child. said it before, I'll say it again. I was a fan of Star Wars before I was a fan of absolutely anything. And maybe a lot of it just simply is the fact that I'm just glad that we get more Star Wars content. And so I'm willing to take the good and the bad, man. I really am. My gosh, look at I'm surrounded by this stuff. I really should do a tour of my room sometime soon. I put up some videos on Instagram. I talked about that last week, but I really turned my room into something pretty amazing. At least for me. I'm just surrounded by Star Wars stuff. Thanks, Shock Fitness. I need to go check out your YouTube page. I'm currently on a pretty effective diet so far. I have been trying to lose some weight as of late, and have started to, and I'm down to that. You know, when you go, if you got on a diet before, you know, you get to that place where you just start feeling comfortable again in your clothes. I'm at that spot and knows you're making progress. But, you know, considering your title, I should probably go check out your page. Who knows? Maybe it's not about fitness at all. But thank you as always for the comment. LB writes this: "It's too late for me, son," is the equivalent of "You're a monster, yes I am." The really evil villains think they're the good guys. You're absolutely right. Thank you. Winter in Bloom says this: "If Raylo doesn't happen, then I'm not sure how they could end things in a way that doesn't seem more than a little depressing. Not that there can't be some sadness mixed in at the end. It's just that Star Wars has never had the tone of a story that's going to end worse than it started. I could be wrong, though. We'll have to wait and see. On a lighter note, happy birthday." Thank you. I had a look at your display cases on Instagram, and I think they're awesome. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Let's see. Black-Eyed Lily, friend of the show, says this: "Whenever I hear the complaint about Rey being too proficient with the lightsaber, I really wish there was some dialogue in TFA or The Last Jedi that makes it explicit how much knowledge Rey got from being inside Kylo's mind. Especially as The Last Jedi novel makes it clear. However, there is some wonderful visual evidence to support this fact in The Last Jedi. I always appreciate how you talk about watching this movie so frequently and continuing to find more love about it. It's just saturated with so much imagery that tells the story all on its own." That's one of the things, even apart from The Last Jedi, that I just love about Star Wars as a whole. And again, a lot of these things I've said before, but this is a good opportunity to say it again. Watching these films, you can just look at the frame. I have all the art books and the making of books, and I love them all. But watching a Star Wars film, you can really decide how it is you want to watch it. You can put it on in the background and just have it be back there and hear the music and the ambiance. I do that sometimes when I'm writing. You can put it on and not really pay as close attention to the story and just look at the frame and the detail that's put into every single frame. I mean, you can get into it and decide, I'm really going to sink myself into the story, and that's what I did just now watching The Last Jedi. The movies are just so enjoyable on so many different levels, and you can't say that for every film. For some films you can, don't get me wrong, but you can't say that for every film. The Tumblr post I've attached today is short and sweet but very informative. The person found that there are specific moves that Rey makes when practicing the lightsaber on the island of Crate that are a mirror image of the moves that Kylo makes in his duel with Luke. I mean, they're exact same moves in the exact same order. Once you see it, you know it has to be intentional. It's just one of hundreds of little details that show how brilliant this movie is. After this individual posted this essay, there were several articles written on different websites about this detail from The Last Jedi, but as far as I know, she was the first to notice this little detail and share it with the rest of us. I hope you had a great weekend and a chance to go enjoy some Star Wars. Thank you, Black-Eyed Lily, as always, for that. I'm actually going to go and check out that Tumblr page as soon as I'm done with the podcast this week. You know, Rian Johnson's Star Wars movie it's pretty fascinating. And one of these days on my bucket list, I would love to sit down and interview him because he made this amazing addition to The Force Awakens. And we know what J.J. Abrams' role was in The Force Awakens, but The Last Jedi seems to me to be this perfect blend of this uber Star Wars fan, this amazing filmmaker who's very, very visually artistic and is a great writer, who needed to move the story forward but also knew that this may be his only chance to make a Star Wars movie. So he made a very special Star Wars movie, and one that really does work on its own. And it truly is unique and special in that way, along with all the other ways as well. Anna writes this: "Why is everyone giving up on Raylo now? Daisy can't spill the beans yet." That's why she talks about other things about the movie. Yeah, I don't know. Anna, I don't know exactly where you're getting. There must have been a comment that I made on the show about people giving up on Raylo. Might have been people, unless that was in response to somebody else's clip. But or somebody else's comment, but I certainly haven't seen that. All right, let's see. Scotian writes this. It's got to be Reylo. Nothing else makes sense. And then they tell me it's pronounced Scotian, as in Nova Scotia, but I am Nova Scotian. And thank you, and I apologize for butchering your name last week, Scotian. All right, let's see. Let's go to Aaron. Says, I'm not sure if anyone has pointed this out, not trying to be a jerk to correct you, but around the 56 mark, you said the answer you seek is not behind you, it's ahead. Maz Kanata actually says the belonging you seek is not behind you, it's ahead. Yeah, I know, I got that wrong. I apologize, and I don't mind you correcting me at all. That's immediately after she says, whoever you are waiting for on Jakku, they're never coming back. But there's someone who could, and Rey says Luke. To me, it's obvious after The Last Jedi that Maz was really talking about Ben Solo. It almost feels like Rey was a stand-in for the audience in that moment saying Luke, because that's what people were expecting, that she'd find her belonging in her family, assuming her father was Luke. I think Reylo and the idea of these two lonely people that have both been looking to belong their entire lives, finally finding each other, makes for a much more interesting story than Rey Skywalker. But to each their own. I've never commented before, but I really enjoy your podcast. Let me double back to something really quick. This idea, I think Reylo, and the idea these two lonely people that have both been looking to belong their entire lives, finally finding each other, makes for a much more interesting story than Rey Skywalker. That is incredibly true. And I think that's what makes the idea of Reylo so powerful for so many people, and for even me. It's very much that idea, because it's that way for a lot of people, right? Two lonely people looking to belong, like we all do, their entire lives, and then finding it in each other. Is there any better premise for a fairy tale or a story of eternal love? There just isn't. And I think that's what makes the idea of Reylo so popular, and also so relatable within people, because for so many people that is just the truth, and that's what people are looking for. Even when they've found the person that they love, there still is that sense of being together with that person, and you can still go and relate to that. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that, and you correct me anytime you like. Don't mind it at all. Miranda writes this. Hopefully I'm not too late to comment. Never. I would like to say, and this probably belongs in another video since you mentioned The Last Jedi, gasps, I figured this needed to be said. Even though many have said that Episode 9 divided the fandom, I think, and this is my unimportant, not to be taken seriously opinion, I think in addition, and this could be either good or bad, that it's gotten people to talk about Star Wars more than usual, and to have it go on for so long, it's kind of rooted in intensity and passion. Look at it however way you choose, whether it could have been something more, or is everything you wanted, or it was devastating, but The Last Jedi made people talk about Star Wars, and I honestly believe that if The Last Jedi didn't turn out to be the movie that it's become, and just me would not be looking forward to the rise of Skywalker the way that I am now. I still find myself going back and learning more things about it, both good and bad, but I hold on to the positive with enough realism at the same time, and that's how I want to go in and view the rise of Skywalker. By the way, full disclosure, I was one of those people that thought the Rey would be a Skywalker here. Here we are 2 years later, and guess where I stand now? I let it go and accepted the results. I agree with you, Miranda. And again, I am a big believer that everything happens for a reason, even negativity in the Star Wars fandom. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that even though there is some division when it comes to The Last Jedi, people have been talking about it. It's interesting because I heard a couple of different shows this week. And again, there was a lot of cynicism. I don't know what was going on, but just across the board with a lot of the Star Wars content creators, there was a lot of skepticism, critical thoughts, and I don't know what it was. Anyway, I think the Sith Troopers are rad, and I can't wait to see how the Sith are going to play out in The Rise of Skywalker. But I've also heard a couple of different podcasts talk about how they felt there wasn't any hype surrounding this movie, and they didn't understand why we hadn't gotten more than we'd gotten so far. And I'm just kind of was scratching my head going, what? We're on the same promotional path that we're always on. We got a trailer when we thought we got a teaser trailer when we thought we were going to get the teaser trailer. We always get some kind of reveal at San Diego Comic-Con. We're going to have to wait a couple of weeks, but D23 is right around the corner, and we're going to get a behind-the-scenes reel there. And then shortly after that, before we know it, the full trailer is going to be here, and it's going to be we're going to be saturated with The Rise of Skywalker. The only thing that I can attribute people thinking that there's not a lot of promotion or hype going on is because of the negativity of The Last Skywalker. There's been so much discussion around the films. This has currently been the longest distance in the Disney era, if I'm not mistaken, that we've ever had of Star Wars movies. So we've reached that point where we're further out from the last Star Wars release than we ever have been. And so I just think because of that, there's an expectation level that we should have more stuff to talk about with The Rise of Skywalker. But the truth is, I think that once this marketing machine, and it's begun, has really kicked into full gear, the Sith Trooper reveal and all these toys attached to it has given us enough to chew on for the next couple of weeks, easy. Trust me, I think even with the Last Jedi controversy, those people that hated that film, they're gonna want to go and see how this final movie plays out. And I'm of the opinion that The Rise of Skywalker is going to make a lot of people who didn't like The Last Jedi happy, and I think we'll have the opportunity to go and actually change some opinions of The Last Jedi, not because things are going to be retconned, but because seeing the full picture will give them better context for what Rian Johnson did. Lauren writes this: Happy birthday, John. Thank you very much. I just finished listening to this week's podcast. Her was her birthday, so happy birthday. Thinking about the Force Ghost for The Rise of Skywalker, I think it would be rad if we had something like the Dead Men of Dun Harrow or Army of the Dead that we see in Return of the King. Interesting. How cool would it be? Unlike what Obi-Wan said, the Ghost can interfere. However, they can only do so when they are all together. Then in the climax, they surrender their power to save Ben from death. Going to change gears here. I hate the idea of Ben having to die. I think the death of some kind would silence the Ben-demption haters. If Ben dies and is resurrected by Rey or Force Ghost, then we get an ending very similar to Beauty and the Beast. Yep. Which Reylo has been compared to countless times. The Beast has served him. The Beast has served his sentence in living in his Beast form for 10 years. He then found someone that he could love, that could love him as he is and sees the potential in him. Does this sound familiar? Then, in the climax, the Beast saves his beauty from death while taking the blow himself. Her love and confession of that love saves him, and he is restored to his human/prince form. If that isn't the most Disney ending ever, then I'm a Gungan. And Star Wars is owned by... That's funny. I've always loved the idea of sacrifice on Ben's part that's mirrored Vader's in Return of the Jedi. Yet I love even more the idea that we could see him live out his redemption instead of dying outright like Anakin does. And living a redeemed Ben Solo is my ideal ending for the saga. Like you, I will be happy with whatever the amazing artists and creators end up giving us for this film. I cannot wait till December. I'm going to ride this hype train all the way to the theater seat. Thank you for your show. I listen every week, and it's become hands down my favorite. Wow, thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate that. Keep being rad. Happy birthday, and may the Force be with you. And again, thank you so much for the kind words. You guys are also amazing. This doesn't get talked about a lot, and I think there's a way to do it in the films to make it work. But don't think for a second, and this is the way that I look at it, don't think for a second that Darth Vader, in his worst Darth Vaderness, was a happy person. Or that Kylo Ren's been happy all this time. I think people forget about that. If you've gone through difficulties... And everybody has, right? But if you've gone through times when perhaps you were behaving in a certain way that you shouldn't have gone and you shouldn't have behaved. Maybe you treated somebody inappropriately. Or you just acted in a way that wasn't becoming. That's not a good feeling. And even people that are just mean people, mean-spirited people, those aren't happy people. You're living with this weight. That great line from Rogue One to Cassian Andor, sometimes, the prison bars, sometimes the prisons are the ones we carry around with us. Kylo Ren pushing Ben Solo down and being that person. He's not a happy person. He's an angry person. He calls himself a monster. My point being is that if we get to the end of The Rise of Skywalker and he's redeemed, and Lauren made the point, and I'm reinforcing it, and that is, he's been paying his price. Yes, he's taken out people along the way. Yes, there is this, but the cost of that has cost him and his soul for that time being. Right? I don't want to turn this into a religious discussion, regardless of what your belief system is. I to each their own, right? You believe what it is you want to believe, and I believe what I want to believe, and it's cool. I have no problem with that. And even somebody that does a political talk show, look, you can believe whatever it is you want to believe. You're entitled to your opinion. We can disagree on that, but I'm not going to disrespect you for it. That being, all that being said, Kylo Ren is not a happy person. And if you are an individual, those people, it's like when you come to find a religion, you come to find a belief beyond who you are. And I won't even attribute it to Christianity. We'll just talk about religion in general. For a lot of people, you have that awakening moment where you're willing to give up the self-centered life that you've been living and decide, there is something beyond me that's more important than me. And I'm going to give that up, and it lifts that weight off your shoulders. So she's right. When I see the idea of Bendemption and what he needs to do to sacrifice, in my opinion, I need to look at that. I look at that, and I go, yeah, he's been suffering this whole time. He's been paying those wages for his sin in this persona. And even when he comes out of it, if he comes out of it and it's redeemed, he's going to have to work at staying a good person. That's going to be part of the redemption process, is that now you've decided I'm going to change my ways, and now you have to stick to it. And that's also not an easy task. Okay, Skydrathic, friend of the show. I don't think the final end fight of Episode 9 takes place on the Death Star. I was surprised to find out there are people out there thinking Vader was not redeemed by the end of Return of the Jedi. If fans do not see the Kylo/Rey dynamic as the potential future plot, then all they concentrate on is Rey's parentage, right, and old characters. Yep, it's because they are blinded. These are the people saying there is nothing interesting left for 9, and if that's true, and that's true if you're completely ignorant. Yeah, well, I mean, look, and I don't want to be so harsh as to say completely ignorant, but if you're just shutting yourself off from that possibility, I tend to agree that the people that don't care about the Reylo situation tend to go and gravitate towards, and I agree with this idea of Rey's parentage or the old characters in the stories. They go on to say, I had a very wonderful Star Wars experience this week. I work in a small town bakery in the midst of countryside Germany. I had no idea. It cracks me up where you people live. I'm sorry. That's cool. It blows my mind when I had no idea that Skydrathic was living in Germany. That's amazing to me. It is incredible to think that I have people around the world listening to this show and my ramblings every single week. Anyways, I work in the small town bakery in the midst of a countryside Germany, and suddenly this 40-year-old lady comes in wearing a golden Star Wars The Last Jedi shirt. I was so awestruck. So I compliment her for her shirt, and the woman says, thanks, I got 2 of them. Here in the middle of nowhere, man, that was awesome. That's so cool. Friend of the show, Shlomo, writes this. So I listened to your podcast this week while sitting in a dentist chair during a 2-hour root canal. It was the only thing keeping me sane. I laughed a few times, and now the dentist wants to listen too. Your fan base in Israel has grown by 2. I'm worldwide. All right, what else we got here? Laura Osborne sent an incredibly lengthy piece, and I'm going to save it for next week's show because I want to make sure we spend some time on it, mentioning how much they love the show, and again, I want to double back to it at some point in time and spend some time on it. We'll do that on next week's show because this week's show has run so long. So Lauren Osborne, don't go anywhere. I'll cover your email on next week's show. Let's see, what else do we got here? All right, we'll wrap up with this. Friend of the show, Anthea Gaia. Great show again this week, as always. Just caught up on your shows from last week and this week since I was on vacation. I want to mention that I've been listening to the audio version of Embark while on vacation, and I'm digging it so far. Whew! I hadn't read her comment yet. That could have gone one of a couple of ways. I'll be sure to let you know my thoughts as I get deeper into it. I had to laugh when you were reading the portion of the book where Katha is listening to a podcast and you stop and say, "Doing that thing with my fingers for quotation marks." I felt like I was listening to one of your podcasts. That was the point. Really love the audio version. Love the last 2 weeks' podcast. Completely agree with Lindsay's comments in her articles that you mentioned. I had to stand up and shout when you asked, what is this sequel trilogy about if not Reylo? I have this discussion with my brother all the time about how it's about Reylo, but he still thinks they are related. I'm hoping to get to tell him I told you so in the end. Really thinking your take on the water fight that Daisy mentioned is correct based on the leaks. That was my first thought too. Either way, sounds super cool and epic. Can't wait to see it. All right, and that wraps up, lengthy show this week. And I know, man, that I really threw a lot out there in the commentary portion of the show this week. I get that. So if you were feeling overwhelmed because of all the different stuff I was throwing out in reference to my excitement over the Sith Trooper, just know that I'm acknowledging it. But I'm really curious to get your thoughts, and if you're able to sort of pull on any threads and maybe come up with some other potential scenarios and your thoughts on the Sith Trooper and the title of Imperial coming back, I'd love to hear it. We will be back again next week. A quick word from our sponsors as soon as we get past the intro here, so you're welcome to hang out and hear what I have to say. If not, thank you so much for checking the show out. Be sure to like and subscribe if you follow it on YouTube or whatever platform you listen to the podcast on. And we'll be back again next week. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. And now here's Obi-Wan Kenobi to take us out.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.
We are into the proofreading phase of the second book in my series of Embark books. Should be out in the next month. That's at least the time frame. For those that are not familiar with book one of my series Embark, here's a little ad to tell you all about it, and then I'll tell you how you can go and pick it up. For Earth, the end is near. Only a reluctant hero and the girl he loves have the power to save humanity's future. It's the not-so-distant future, and car culture is replaced by air and space flight, made possible by two of Earth's largest corporations. Flight mechanic Taft Guardia spends his free time racing through the skies with his three best friends and the girl he longs to be with, headstrong Katha Morrow. With the planet on the brink of an industrial apocalypse, a powerful and ruthless corporate madman, Sint Argum, moves to exploit the disaster with his covertly created military. When Taft, Katha, and their friends uncover a shocking secret, Sint Argum will stop at nothing to find them. Time on Earth is running out, but with the help of a ragtag group of young pilots, they'll fight for humanity's future and survival among. That should have been Among the Stars. That got cut off too early. My apologies there. Go to Amazon.com, search for Jon, Jon Justice, and Embark, and you can pick up the ebook, which is available right now for $2.99. You can pick up the paperback for $12.99. And the audiobook is a number of different prices depending on if you pick up one of the other versions. The regular price is $14.50, narrated and produced by me. This is the first book in a series of books, starting off with the core trilogy. And again, book 2, Embark, Treasure in Darkness, is in the proofreading phase right now and should be out in the next 4 weeks. So if you haven't gone to pick up the first book yet, do so right now by going to Amazon.com and getting a copy for yourself or for a friend. If you've thought about supporting the show, this is the best way to go and do it. Pick up a copy of my science fiction space opera novel, written because of my love of Star Wars and inspired by the works of George Lucas. Thanks again for checking the show out this week, and we'll be back again next week. I hope you have the opportunity to go by Amazon and pick up the book, and if you've already done so, or if you plan on doing so, thank you so much in advance. I really hope you enjoy it, and after you read it, please go and leave a positive review on Amazon.com.
My nerd world.